Right, this is section 5.4. We are working on order of operations. And the order of operations consists of something called PEMDAS, or Please Excuse My Dear Aunt Sally. So it's parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, and I want you to see that these two are equal, meaning if you get to this point and you have both multiply and divide in the problem, you're just going to multiply and divide going from left to right throughout the whole problem. Same thing with add and subtract. A is for add, S is for subtract here. And you're going to work add, subtract, just moving from left to right through the problem. So let me give you the first example here and we'll work through this. I have 4 minus 8 plus 3, parentheses, negative 2 plus 7. Alright, so we're going to go back to that PEMDAS. And I start with the P, parentheses. So what parentheses do I have? Well, I see this, right? That negative 2 is in parentheses, but I can't do anything inside of the parentheses, so there's technically no parentheses. An example of what a parenthesis could look like would be this. If that was inside the parentheses, what would come out of that parenthesis would be 1, okay? But since this 2 up here doesn't have anything with it, it's just going to have to stay the same. So there's technically no parentheses in this problem at all. Alright, exponents are a number with a little number to it, like a power. Okay, there's no exponents in this problem at all, so we're going to move on to the next part. And so the next piece is to multiply and divide. And we're going to do all of the multiplication and all of the division from left to right. And so the only multiplication I see is this guy right here. There is no division in this problem, so I don't even have to worry about the divide. So when I multiply a positive 3 times a negative 2, I know that the rule is if the signs are different, the answer is always negative. And 3 times 2 gave me 6. So these two pieces became the negative 6. So I'm going to bring down everything that I have not used, and this is what the rest of the problem looks like. Okay? Alright, so now I'm at the point where I'm ready for add, subtract. Okay, we're going to add and subtract moving from left to right through the problem. So that means that I'm going to start at the left side, and I'm going to take 4 minus 8. Okay, so if I'm going to work this correctly, I'm going to change the sign to add and change the sign of the number that follows it. Okay, these guys are going to get brought down because I haven't used them yet. And so now I'm going to look at this addition problem. I know that the rules are if the signs are different, I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. And so when I subtract, I get 4. The bigger number is the negative 8, so I'm going to take negative 4 that came out of this piece. And the other parts that come down are the minus 6 and plus 7 that have not been used. They came all the way down here. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to keep working this from left to right, but I've got to move this guy out of the way to do so. Alright, the next piece is going to be these guys. I have a negative 4. I'm going to change the sign and give the sign or change the sign of this number next to it. So this is what I now have. I have a negative 4 plus a negative 6. The signs are the same, so I'm going to add and keep the sign, and so this becomes a negative 10, and I'm going to bring down that plus 7. This is an addition problem, so I'm going to see if the signs are the same. They are different, so I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. And so my final answer is negative 3. Okay, so it's following the rules of order of operations, or the Please Excuse My Dear Aunt Sally, or PEMDAS, or whatever you call it, and working through a problem until you have a final answer. Okay, so let's try another one. The next problem is parentheses 2 minus 4 squared plus 4 times negative 2 plus 8. Okay, so for me, I just write it all down again. PEMDAS, right? Parentheses. I have parentheses here. Okay, and so I'm going to take care of inside the parentheses first. I want you to see that this other parenthesis over here doesn't have anything besides a single number in it, so there's nothing to be done inside there. So the parentheses over here, I have a 2, it's minus, so I'm going to change it to an addition and change the sign of the number that follows it, and so this is what I end up having. Right? And so I have an addition problem where one is a positive 2 and one is a negative 4. Signs are different. So I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. And so -2 is what the answer is of that piece. I left it inside parentheses because I want you to see that I'm going to bring down the squared, and the squared belongs to everything inside there. And so now I'm bringing down everything else that I have not yet used. Okay, so there's the blue 2. I want you to see that everything in blue is brought down. The red piece is the answer from that parenthesis piece. Okay, so now I've moved on from parentheses. I'm looking at E for exponents, and that's where this squared, or that raised to the second power, is. And so what this really is -2 times -2, because it tells me I have whatever's in parentheses, I have 2 of them. So a negative times a negative means my answer is always positive, and 2 times 2 is 4. So that became that. I'm going to bring down everything else that I have not used. Okay. I'm moving on now to the next step, and it's multiply divide. I only see one thing to be done from this section, and it's the multiplication. And so I will multiply a +4 times the -2. The signs are different, so the answer is always going to be negative. 4 times 2 is 8. So this whole piece became -8. I bring everything that I haven't used down. Okay, and now I'm going to add and subtract from left to right. So this is the piece that goes first. I'm going to change the sign of the number that follows, and this becomes a 4 plus a -8. Signs are different, so I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the bigger number and bring down the number that I have not yet used. Okay, so now I'm finishing that last step, right, of the add subtract step, and so I'm going to go ahead and write this piece over here. So I have -4 plus 8. This is an addition problem, so I look at the signs are different, so I subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. The bigger number is 8, so this is a +4 final answer. Okay, this is the first time that you're actually working problems that is going to probably require you to write something on your paper and not do the majority of it in your head. So if you solve a problem like this from the black ink at the top to a final answer, I will count it wrong. Even if you put +4, +4 is your final answer, it's wrong, because you are not showing me anything that you've learned in this class. This could be an answer that you got from somebody else. This could be from, I don't know, a guess even. But it's not, I'm not grading you upon that 4. I'm grading you upon this process of knowing how to work through it. So don't think that your goal is 4. Your goal is to show me how you got to 4 to get the right answer, okay? All right, let's try another one. This one looks very, very intimidating, and I will tell you that right up front. Okay, let's talk about this. What you have, instead of one long equation like this, you now have 2, one on the numerator and one in the denominator, where when you get your final answer, it's telling you to divide, right? Because that's a division problem. You cannot divide until the very end. You've got to have one number answer here on top, one number answer here on the bottom, and then you divide the top number by the bottom number, okay? So we're going to have to work through this step by step to make this happen. We're going to look at the numerator, or this one that I'm now writing in red, first. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to follow PEMDAS. Okay, is there any parentheses in the top, in the red? No. Any exponents? Yes. And so my base is 2. 2 is what I see, and this is how many times. It does not mean 2 times 3, okay? This means 2 times 2 is 4. Bring down what I haven't used, and 2 times 4 is 8. So 2 to the 3rd power is 8, and I brought over that 10 that I haven't used yet, okay? I'm going to keep going here. This is not an addition problem, it's actually subtraction. So I need to change it to addition and change the sign of the number that follows. And so this now is what I have. It's addition, so I look at the signs. Signs are different, so I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. The bigger number is 10, so negative is what I get, and I get -2. So -2 is what I have on top, or as a numerator, okay? So I'm going to move all of this down over to the side and delete it and erase it because we are done with it. One other thing I want to show you. Notice that we only made it through the parentheses and then the exponents, and then we didn't have any of these, and we jumped all the way over to the subtract and then actually moved back to the add when we changed it to addition. So sometimes it's possible that you don't even have some of these things to deal with, okay? All right, now we're looking at the denominator because we are not done with this problem. So I have 4 minus 5. Remember that this is a subtraction problem, so I'm going to change the sign, So now I have 4 plus a negative 5. Okay, signs are different. Well, I'm sorry, let's start over. It's an addition problem. So signs are different, so I subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. 5 is bigger, so it's a negative 1. And so a negative 1 goes right over there. Remember in the beginning that I told you that the fraction bar, this guy right here, means divide. Okay, so the problem that you actually have is this right here. Okay, it can be written either way, it's the same thing. But what I want you to see is that you have either multiply or divide have the same rules. And so the rule for this is if the signs are the same, your answer is always positive. So this is going to be a positive, well 2 divided by 1 is 2. So a positive 2 is your final answer. All right, so I just did a couple of problems for you. And what I want you to know is that your homework has 8 of these. Okay, there's nothing too terribly difficult. I'm going to do one last problem, and I'm going to show you a different kind of parenthesis, okay, and we call them brackets. So I want you to see what one of those looks like. So this problem has a negative on the outside, and here's your bracket. All right, so what you need to see here is that the brackets are a type of parenthesis. And so we're starting here. We have 2 sets of parentheses technically. We have the red ones and this bracket here, okay? One is not better than the other. You're just going to take care of all of your parentheses before you move on to do anything else. But what we're finding in this problem is that we're going to do everything inside the brackets before we multiply this negative 1, because it's an understood 1, that negative 1 to whatever's inside. We're going to do that negative 1 multiplying at the very, very end. If we look inside the brackets, we have a set of parentheses, and this is where we're starting. So I have an addition problem. Signs are different, so I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the bigger number, and the bigger number was a 5, so it's a plus 1. So what I want you to see is I have 1, the squared comes down, and everything else comes down as well. It's still in brackets because I have that negative 1. Ooh, that looks ugly. This negative 1 that's on the outside. Okay? I'm moving on. My parentheses are done. I'm moving on to the exponents, and here's my exponent piece. So I have the base of 1. I have 2 of them, so this is what I have. 1 times 1 is 1. So I have 3 minus 2 times 1 inside the brackets with a negative 1 on the outside. Okay. The next piece of this is to cross out our exponent and move on to what we have next. So multiply divide is our next piece, and here it is. So I am multiplying a negative 2, right? The sign in front of it goes with it. So this is a negative 2 times a positive 1. Signs are different. The answer is always negative when we're multiplying. 2 times 1 is 2. I bring down the 3 that I have not yet used. It's still in brackets because that negative 1 is still on the outside. And so now I have a subtraction problem. And we have learned that when we start dealing with sign numbers, we don't ever have a negative or a subtraction problem. We change it to addition and give the sign to the guy next to it. So it's change the sign, change the sign. Okay? So now I have 3 plus a negative 2. It's an addition problem. The signs are different, so I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. And so I end up with a positive 1 inside brackets with a negative 1 on the outside. The brackets, just like parentheses, mean we will multiply. Okay? So I want to point that out right here. This negative 2 and the 1, parentheses were around it, we multiplied it together. Okay? And so we're doing the same thing here. So I have a negative and a positive. Signs are different. The answer is always negative. 1 times 1 is 1. So my final answer is a negative 1. All right, so make sure that you are working on your TOEICs for 5.4. Bring those to class ready to turn in. And that's it.